People often think the past is dormant, but it merely waits for a moment of weakness to rise again, reminding us of lessons that are never old. History may not repeat itself, but human pride and thoughtlessness always find a way to return. This true story is a painful testament to that, a lesson paid for with tears and the fracturing of a seemingly peaceful family. It shows that sometimes the silence of an elder can be more fearsome than a tempest, and a single thoughtless act can shatter what was built over generations. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because some truths need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. Some stories, no matter how painful, must be told. The afternoon fell with a heavy air over the ranch in the Central Valley, and inside the kitchen, the smell of freshly baked cornbread, mixed with that of new fabric, spread across the table, a white fabric, waiting to become a bride's veil. Clara, with 79 years on her shoulders, bent her frail, curved body while her trembling hands tried to pass the needle through the fabric. Each stitch was a small victory against the tremor that age imposed on her, and a soft murmur escaped her lips, saying that haste unravels the heart. She said it more to herself than to anyone, as if she were also embroidering her memories and sorrows into the cloth. Her gaze was full of tenderness and weariness, remembering all the time she had sewn dresses for her daughter when she was a child, with the hope of one day seeing her happy. But now she felt that with each stitch, she was also sewing up the cracks in a weakened bond. Across from her, Scarlett, the 2-year-old daughter, had skin flushed with wedding anxiety and eyes tense with impatience. She couldn't stand the slowness of her mother's hands, nor the weight of the advice that fell like constant drops. And suddenly, with a sharp gesture, she snatched the needle away while shouting not to ruin her day, that she always did everything her way, that she never let her make her own decisions. The needle slipped from her fingers, and the broken thread fell to the floor, tangling on the terracotta tile like a bitter omen. Clara looked at her, wounded. Her eyes welled up more from sadness than from tired sight, and she tried to respond calmly, saying that she only wanted to help, that she was doing it with love. But Scarlett replied with a sharp voice, saying that all she managed to do was meddle, that this wedding was hers, and that no one, not even her mother, was going to spoil it. The atmosphere grew thick, and in the midst of that silence, the light, venomous laugh of Patricia, the mother-in-law, appeared. She observed the scene from a high-backed chair with a contemptuous smile. She said with a sharp voice that in her family, things had always been done impeccably, with elegance and without improvisation. And she looked at Clara as one looks at a worn-out object, as if the woman were nothing more than a nuisance at the celebration. Clara, with dignity in her voice, though with a heavy heart, replied that in her family, things had always been done with love, although she knew that word was seen as a weakness in the other woman's mouth. Scarlett pressed her lips together in annoyance, looked away, and began arranging the flowers on the table with jerky movements, as if that act could erase what had just happened. In the doorway, leaning on his wooden cane, stood Walter, the 6-year-old grandfather, a silent witness to the scene. His old eyes had seen wars, famines, and losses, and now they saw the same story of pride and arrogance repeat itself at a wedding that should have been a celebration. He said nothing at first, but he lifted his cane and let it fall gently against the floor, and that hollow sound echoed in the room like a contained thunderclap. That subtle tap weighed more than any shout, and everyone stood motionless. It's in these quiet moments that the deepest cracks in a family begin to show. A broken thread, a contemptuous smile, and a grandfather's silent warning. This is only the beginning of a storm that is about to break. Let's see what happens as the wedding draws closer. Scarlett pretended not to hear, but inside, something trembled like a crack. Clara lowered her gaze, picked up the fallen thread, and tried to thread the needle again, her fingers trembling, but with the determination of someone who refuses to give up. She wanted to prove that she was still useful, that she could still support her daughter, even if it was with a piece of fabric between her fingers. Patricia, with her lips painted bright red, leaned forward and said in a venomous tone that it was embarrassing that things were still being improvised at this stage, that her son Logan deserved a clean and perfect wedding, without stains or ridiculous scenes. The silence stretched out again, heavy and hostile, until Walter raised his voice slowly, saying that in families, what is truly inherited are not luxuries or decorations, but the way of respecting one's elders, and that whoever forgets that lesson builds nothing but ruins. His words were not advice, they were a sentence. And although no one dared to answer, they lingered in the room like glowing embers that burned without going out. Scarlett bit her lower lip. She wanted to respond, but shame stopped her, trapped between anger and the pain of being exposed in front of everyone. Clara closed the sewing box with a soft click, as if putting away not just a needle, but also a wounded heart. Outside, the sky was darkening, and the smell of rain filled the air, and everyone knew in silence that something had broken even before the wedding had begun. The night before the wedding arrived, wrapped in an air of nervousness that could be felt in every corner of the ranch. The sky was overcast, and the crickets' chirping was interrupted by gusts of wind that made the oak trees creak. Inside the room, lit only by a yellowish lamp, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap, pensive, looking at the folded veil resting on a chair, which she had half finished after her daughter's outburst. She felt the weight of unspoken words pressing on her chest because she had been hearing comments from neighbors and acquaintances for hours, saying that Logan had unsettled business in Los Angeles, debts and entanglements that could cast a shadow over Scarlett's life. And although she knew that any warning could unleash her daughter's fury, her worry won out, and she got up and walked slowly to the room where the bride was trying on her dress in front of the mirror. Scarlett, with the dress half adjusted and her gaze full of pride, turned impatiently when she saw her mother enter and asked what she wanted now. And Clara, with a calm but trembling voice, told her that she had heard worrying rumors that some said Logan had pending matters in Los Angeles, unresolved business and shady affairs that could bring misfortune, and she begged her to think carefully before giving her life to a man who might not be what he seemed. Scarlett's reaction was immediate, as if those words were gasoline on a burning fire. She let out a cry, saying that she wouldn't sabotage her, that she had always distrusted everything and everyone, that she couldn't stand this habit of meddling anymore, and she accused her mother of envying her happiness because she had never had a wedding like this, nor a husband with money and position. As she raged, her hands struck the table, knocking the open sewing box. The small metal thimble skittered across the stone floor with a sharp, metallic clink. It spun to a stop between them, a silent and bitter omen on the cold ground. Clara lowered her gaze and murmured that all she wanted was to protect her, that a mother always senses what a daughter refuses to see. But Scarlett replied that she didn't need her protection or her warnings, that she was no longer a child, and that the only thing she demanded was to be left in peace, to be supported, instead of having her dreams buried with rumors from the farmer's market. The atmosphere became unbearable. The lamp flickered as if the tension reached it, and in the doorway, in the gloom of the hallway, Walter stood with his elongated shadow, watching the scene in silence, his eyes sunk in deep wrinkles that seemed to read beyond the words, not intervening, but absorbing every gesture, every reproach, and every contained tear. His presence was like an invisible wall, a witness to the confrontation. And although he said nothing at that moment, the cane he held in his hand tapped lightly against the floor, not as a warning, but as a reminder that he was there, that the weight of tradition and memory accompanied him, and that what was happening that night would not be easily forgotten. Scarlett turned back to the mirror, trying to ignore her grandfather's figure and her mother's voice, and concentrated on adjusting her dress, repeating in a low voice that nothing and no one would ruin her day, that the future was already decided. Meanwhile, Clara picked up the thimble with trembling hands and put it back in the sewing box, like someone putting away a premonition, her heart heavy with the certainty that a mother's love is never enough when pride stands in the way. Outside, the storm seemed to be approaching with a dull rumble, and inside the house, there was a sense that the walls had witnessed a wound that would take a long time to heal. The church bells rang with an almost defiant force against the gray clouds gathering over the town, and although each peal seemed to announce joy, there was a strange premonition in the air, as if even the metal felt that the storm was about to break. The church was adorned with fresh flowers that gave off an intense aroma, roses and lilies intertwined in makeshift arches that the neighbors had helped set up since dawn, and the bright colors contrasted with the increasingly dark sky. The guests arrived, dressed in their best clothes, some in rented suits, others in dresses passed down from other celebrations, and everyone held small smartphones that shone under the reflections of the yellow lights, ready to record every moment of the union between Scarlett and Logan. Inside the church, the murmur of the service mixed with the rustle of fans and the creaking of the wooden pews, and every so often, Clara's restrained cough could be heard. She remained seated in the front row, her face serious, and her eyes fixed on her daughter. She thought about all she had been through to get to this moment, the arguments, the silences, the unheeded warnings, and she felt her heart beat with a rhythm of hope and fear at the same time, because she knew that the clouds gathering outside were not just in the sky. Scarlett, on the other hand, walked tall down the center aisle with her gaze fixed forward, holding her father's arm in a dress that made her shine, and a proud expression that left no room for doubt. She smiled for the phones, tilting her head slightly so everyone could see her, and seemed not to notice her mother's gaze, which followed her with a mixture of wounded pride and unconditional love. When the priest pronounced the final words and the guests applauded, a clap of thunder shook the walls, and at that very instant, the rain began to fall with a boundless fury that turned the exit from the church into an unexpected spectacle. The dirt roads transformed into a river of mud that ran swiftly between the stones. Long skirts were soaked in seconds, and men ran, lifting their pants while holding on to their hats. Some guests tried to cover themselves with the service programs. Others laughed nervously, and the smartphones kept recording as if this downpour were part of the script of a dramatic movie. Scarlett squeezed Logan's hand and walked with hurried steps, careful not to let her dress drag too much in the mud. Meanwhile, Patricia, impeccable under a black umbrella, walked with a haughty gesture, as if the storm could not touch her. Clara, however, lagged a few steps behind, trying to follow her daughter through the commotion, her shawl soaked and stuck to her shoulders, and her shoes sinking into the mud. When she managed to get close to Scarlett amid the chaos, she saw that her daughter's veil had gotten tangled in the buckle of a guest's chair and was about to tear. So, with quick but trembling hands, she tried to fix it, saying, "Let me fix it before it tears." Scarlett turned abruptly, and with her eyes burning with fury, she screamed at her to leave her alone, that she didn't need her help, and in a fit of rage, she pushed her mother with both hands in front of everyone. Clara lost her balance and fell backward, her back hitting the soft, wet ground. Her white blouse was instantly stained with mud, and the veil she was still holding in her hand was muddied along with her. A murmur spread like an echo among the guests. First, an icy silence, then nervous whispers, some uncomfortable laughter, and even the metallic sound of a phone that continued to record without mercy. Logan stood paralyzed, his mouth half open, not knowing what to do, and Patricia pretended not to see, lifting her chin as if it were of no importance. From the ground, Clara looked up at her daughter and said nothing. She just blinked as the rain fell on her face, mixing with the tears she didn't want to show. In that instant, Walter moved forward with slow steps, leaning on his cane, which sank into the mud with each movement. He bent down to offer Clara a clean handkerchief, helping her up with her dignity intact. When he looked at Scarlett, his voice was low, yet it cut through the murmurs with absolute authority. "What I have seen," he said, each word landing with the weight of a stone, "is not a bride, but a child who still does not know the meaning of respect." The silence became heavier than the rain. Some acts can't be taken back, and the shame of a public humiliation leaves a scar on an entire family. Walter's words were not just a scolding, they were a judgment, and you can be sure that a man like him will not let this go. The party may continue, but the real story of this night is just beginning. The guests lowered their eyes, and although the music started playing again in some corner of the hall, everyone knew the party would no longer be the same, because what had fallen in the mud that afternoon was not just a mother, but the heart of an entire family. The silence that followed the push was absolute. The rain, the whispers, the nervous laughter, it all vanished, replaced by a single, horrifying image. Clara, covered in mud, looking up at her own daughter. Logan was frozen, his mouth agape. Patricia feigned a sudden interest in the storm clouds above, her face a mask of indifference. The guests looked away, their second-hand shame a palpable force. It was a wound that had opened in public, bleeding in front of everyone. Then, a sound cut